Welcome to Royal Daily Report, your trusted source for royal news and investigations. What you're about to hear was never cleared for public hearing. And once you hear it, there's no going back. Because according to Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, Meghan Markle's past holds a chapter that was never meant to be told publicly. Not debated, not guessed about. A chapter that didn't begin with Prince Harry or the palace gates, but on open water, far from cameras, and aboard Prince Andrew's yacht. And this is where everything gets serious. Sarah Ferguson doesn't just make claims. She alleges something far more dangerous. That she possesses private materials, letters never meant to be read, recordings never meant to be heard, moments preserved in ways that cannot be easily dismissed or denied. Pieces of the past that still exist, waiting. According to her, Meghan wasn't just present in Andrew's world. She had a role in it. One described using a phrase so unsettling, it reframes everything that followed his first client. If that phrase is true, even partially then, the story we've all been told about Meghan's rise doesn't just crack, it collapses. And now, Sarah Ferguson is announcing her plans for a tell-all book that reveals every secret about Meghan Markle. ***, subscribe to Royal Daily Report now. Don't miss any breaking royal investigations. ***, guys. Once you understand what comes next, nothing about everything you know will look the same again. There are words that suggest scandal, and then there are words that suggest intent. When Sarah Ferguson described Meghan Markle as Prince Andrew's first client, she didn't choose that language by accident. This wasn't the vocabulary of gossip. It wasn't the language of romance. It was deliberate and deeply unsettling. A client is not someone who stumbles into a situation by chance. A client implies arrangement, understanding, expectation. It suggests that something was being exchanged, even if the details were never written down or spoken aloud in public. That single phrase dismantles the idea that Meghan's early closeness to Andrew was innocent or accidental. It reframes her presence on those yachts as purposeful, structured, known. According to Sarah's account, Meghan wasn't simply invited as a guest, tagging along for a party. She was someone Andrew noticed early, someone he engaged with privately, someone whose role went beyond social pleasantries. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because if Meghan was Andrew's first client, it suggests the beginning of a pattern, not just for Andrew, but for Meghan herself. A moment where access, intimacy, and opportunity quietly intersected. ***, stay with Royal Daily Report. We bring you the stories others won't dare to tell. *** for Harry. This phrase would have landed like a punch to the chest. He had spent years publicly separating himself from Andrew, rejecting everything his uncle represented. And now the woman he married, the woman he defended against the world, was being described using language that tied her directly into that same dark orbit. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was destabilizing. Memory can be challenged, motives can be questioned, but physical evidence changes the temperature of a story entirely. According to Sarah Ferguson, this is where things became impossible to ignore. She claims to have come across letters, private correspondence, that tied Meghan directly to Andrew's yacht days. These were not formal notes or polite exchanges. They were personal, familiar, written with a tone that suggested intimacy and shared history. Handwriting mattered. So did references. The letters, as Sarah describes them, included details that only someone who had been present would know. Moments, jokes, mentions of places on board that weren't visible to casual guests. This wasn't the language of strangers, and when Sarah read them, the meaning was clear enough that she didn't dismiss them as coincidence or misunderstanding. She recognized what they represented, proof that the connection she remembered hadn't existed only in her memory. For years, those letters remained unseen by the public. Held, weighed, feared. Because once paper speaks, it doesn't take sides. It simply exists. And with those letters, the story crossed a line. It moved from what someone said they saw to what someone said they could hold in their hands. ***, don't forget to subscribe to Royal Daily Report for exclusive royal revelations. ***, and yet, even letters leave room for denial. Ink can be questioned. Pages can be challenged. But voices change everything. And once those entered the picture, the story was no longer drifting quietly at sea. It was heading straight toward impact. According to Sarah Ferguson, what finally shattered the illusion of deniability were recordings, not descriptions, not recollections, Actual audio preserved conversations that were never meant to exist beyond the moment they were spoken. She claims these recordings captured private exchanges between Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle during those yacht days. Conversations that sounded relaxed, familiar, unguarded. The kind of tone people use only when they believe no one else is listening. This is where the story crossed its point of no return. A voice carries personality, rhythm, emotion. It cannot be separated from the person who owns it. And for Prince Harry, the idea that his wife's voice could exist in private conversation with the uncle he despised would have been unbearable. Because once you hear something like that, you don't just hear sound, you hear history rearranging itself. The presence of recordings meant this story was no longer theoretical. It was no longer dependent on belief. It became something that could surface at any moment, something that could be played, replayed, and recognized. And that knowledge alone was enough to destabilize everything. No one paid a heavier emotional price for these allegations than Prince Harry. Harry's entire adult identity has been shaped by rejection. Rejection of royal hypocrisy. Rejection of secrecy. Rejection of the very man at the center of this story. He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with Andrew. He drew lines. He took stands. He walked away. And now, according to these claims, the past had crossed those lines without his knowledge. *** Royal Daily Report, bringing you the truth behind the palace walls. ***. Imagine the conflict that creates. The woman Harry defended against the world. The uncle he worked tirelessly to distance himself from, suddenly tied together by a history he never saw coming. This wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't pride. It was humiliation layered on top of loyalty. Because Harry didn't just love Meghan, he built his entire public war around her innocence. He positioned himself as her shield. And shields crack when they're built on stories that may not be complete. According to accounts tied to this fallout, Harry withdrew. He oscillated between anger and disbelief, between demanding explanations and clinging to denial. Because accepting the possibility meant confronting something far worse than betrayal. It meant confronting the idea that he may have been the last chapter in a story that started long before him. Inside the royal family, silence is never accidental. When these claims began circulating within inner circles, there was no immediate denial, no firm rebuttal, no public correction. Instead, there were quiet meetings behind closed doors, phone calls that never produced statements. The palace knew what was at stake. Prince Andrew's scandals had already wounded the monarchy deeply. To tie Meghan, a woman who publicly challenged the institution directly to Andrew's private world, was not just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. And so, the royal response was not confrontation, it was containment. Silence became strategy because acknowledging the story risked validating it. Denying it risked provoking proof. And proof, according to Sarah Ferguson, existed in forms the palace could not control. Behind the scenes, fear replaced confidence. Not fear of headlines. Fear of what else might surface if this thread was pulled any further. Subscribe now to Royal Daily Report. We keep you informed on every royal development. The monarchy has survived many storms. But this one threatened to connect too many dark chapters at once, and that is why no one rushed to speak. This wasn't a story Sarah Ferguson rushed to tell. In fact, she stayed silent for years. But when she finally spoke, she didn't hint. She didn't suggest it. She made a direct claim. Meghan had multiple encounters on Prince Andrew's yachts, and those encounters were not accidental. If true, this doesn't just add a footnote to Meghan's past. It rewrites the starting point of her royal journey entirely. And for Harry, a man who spent his life distancing himself from Andrew's shadow, the implications were devastating, because secrets hurt more when they involve the people you trust the most. The yacht is not just a setting in this story, it is the foundation. According to Fergie, Andrew's yachts were designed for one purpose, above all else, privacy. Out at sea, away from press, away from witnesses, away from accountability. The usual rules didn't apply. Titles blurred, boundaries softened, and what happened on board stayed on board. These were not casual day trips. They were recurring retreats, carefully chosen environments, where powerful people could relax without fear of exposure. Champagne flowed, conversations loosened, and relationships formed away from public eyes. According to Sarah Ferguson, Meghan was not a stranger to this world. She wasn't someone who wandered into it once by chance. She was someone who returned, Someone who became familiar, someone who understood how that floating world operated. This is why the yacht matters, because it explains how closeness was possible, how repetition happened, and how a future duchess could exist inside royal shadows, long before the public ever knew her name. Royal Daily Report, your window into the hidden royal world. Asterisk, asterisk, and once that door opens, the story doesn't slow down. Because what comes next isn't about rumor or memory. It's about language, intent, and a phrase that changes everything, his first client, in the end. The most unsettling part of this story is not what has been revealed, it's what hasn't. Somewhere. According to Sarah Ferguson, letters still exist that the public has never read. Recordings still exist that the world has never heard. Evidence that remains unreleased not because it lacks power, but because it holds too much. And at the center of it all is that yacht, a vessel that once drifted quietly across open water, carrying laughter, secrets, and moments no one thought would matter years later. A place where reputations were unguarded, where intentions were whispered, where history took a turn without anyone realizing it. Prince Harry believed he escaped the past when he left the palace. But the past doesn't respect distance. It waits, and sometimes it returns with names you never expected to hear spoken together. Whether these claims are ever fully exposed or remain locked away, one truth is undeniable. The story Meghan told the world may not have begun where we were led to believe. And if that yacht could speak, if its polished decks and quiet cabins could tell their story, this would not be the end. It would only be the beginning. Because ghosts don't disappear when you leave them behind. They follow. This was Royal Daily Report, uncovering the truths the palace doesn't want you to know. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you never miss an investigation. Stay informed, stay connected with Royal Daily Report, where the real royal stories are told.